Let's get back to business with Nigeria's Deputy Oil Minister, Dr. Ibe Kachiku, saying the Nigerian government and the military are doing a good job at stemming the tide of militant attacks on oil facilities without a strong use of force. Dr. Kachiku was speaking in an exclusive interview with Bloomberg Television in London on Monday. The oil minister says the steady attacks on oil export assets like the Focados has impacted investors' sentiments, holding back further monies into the sector. Dr. Kachiku, who doubled briefly as a former OPEC president, says he is optimistic the latest 1.2 million round of output cut back by OPEC will hold as agreed. He says oil prices at $60 a barrel was good news for Nigeria as the country stays on course with a higher benchmark pricing for next year's budget at $42.50 per barrel. Meantime, Nigeria's cement giant Dangote and the Tanzanian authorities have reached a deal on the supply of natural gas to the firm's manufacturing plant in the East African country after negotiations stalled over prices. The $500 million cement factory in the southeastern Tanzanian town of Mtwara, set up last year with an annual capacity of 3 million metric tons, runs on expensive diesel generators and has sought government support to reduce those costs. After meeting Aliko Dangote, the company's chairman, who is Africa's richest man, Meru President John Magufuli blamed unspecified middlemen of interfering with supply plans and said the issue has now been resolved, with gas supplies to be sold at a quote-unquote reasonable tariff. Let's get back to the business of oil. Italian oil and gas group Eni has agreed to sell 30% equity in Egypt's offshore company called Shorouk Concession to Russia's Rosneft for $1.125 billion. That's cutting his stake in the Zohr giant gas field to 60%. And he says Rosneft would reimburse pro rata investments already carried out by the Italian group, totaling about $450 million. At the moment, Rosneft has also an option to buy a further 5% stake at the same conditions. And he discovered the Zohr field, the Mediterranean's biggest ever gas field, in the Shorouk concession in August last year. Okay, let's have a cup of coffee. Here about Nigeria. A beverage company in Nigeria is working to market its new blends of freshly roasted and ground coffee to a growing middle class in the country. That has given rise to a coffee drinking culture here. Most coffee sold in Nigeria is instant and imported, unlike coffee packaged by Kaldi Africa. Apart from Ethiopia, which consumes half of the coffee it produces, few sub-Saharan African markets have a taste for coffee.
Kaldi Africa, a beverage processing company based in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, is working to market locally roasted and processed coffee to Nigerians, which are made from blends of coffee sourced in Nigeria, Uganda, and Kenya. The company, set up in March 2015, focuses on promoting coffee, tea, and cocoa, which broadly covers the range of beverages consumed in the country. Nigeria is also working to reinvigorate its agriculture sector that in the 1960s was the top source of employment but has since declined, forcing the country to rely on costly food imports. Kaldi's managing director, Nasra Ali, says most supermarkets in the country sell imported instant coffee varieties, but that there is demand for freshly ground and brewed quality coffee.
What we're having right now is, as a result of the globalization and the coffee drinking culture globally, we know that coffee is the second most drunk beverage after water and is the second highest traded commodity after oil. Then it's inevitable that it will catch up in Nigeria. So what we're basically doing is we're using the best of the African product and preparing ourselves for the launch of the coffee culture in Nigeria and the greater West Africa.
1 kilogram of Kaldi's coffee sells for about $8. Nearly 10% of the world's coffee still comes from the African continent. Nigeria produced just 2,100 tons of coffee in 2013 compared to production in Ethiopia, Africa's biggest producer of the bean, which was 450,000 tons in the 2013-2014 period.
The Cairo business model that we picked was very well thought through, because it was not just about coffee roasting. It's about, when we roast, what are we going to do with the coffee? Do we have the capacity to be able to give the education to people on the benefits of drinking fresh roasted coffee, and how are they going to have the consistency of the fresh roasted coffee.
Apart from Ethiopia, which consumes half of the coffee it produces, few sub-Saharan African markets have a taste for the drink.
Aside from the quality of the products, the passion, the zeal and everything is quite interesting. And then for me as a person, the fact that we have such a thing here in Nigeria is actually great.
New coffee startups in Nigeria are competing with big brands like Nestle, which is responsible for more than 80% of the country's coffee sales, mostly instant coffee sold off mobile carts on the streets.
I got a passion and zeal for coffee. And you can check that out anytime you're in Nigeria. Be part of Nigeria's cup of coffee. Well, not on a very interesting note, we're ending the show today. Inflation in Sudan is approaching 20%, and the government austerity measures have fueled growing discontent and rare protests in Sudan in recent weeks. Protests have so far been small, but mindful of popular anger that swept away several Arab autocrats in 2011, the government of President Omar Hassan al-Bashir has been quick to silence media criticism over its handling of the crisis.
A plummeting currency and a slew of subsidy cuts have pushed food prices up in Sudan, fueling tension as austerity measures continue to bite. For many families in the capital, Khartoum, rationing food has become the norm as they struggle to make ends meet. The Mohammed family, which comprises of 6 members, says it survives on $22 for food and medical care.
I took my son to the clinic for medical treatment with my health insurance card, but despite that, I had to pay 69 Sudanese pounds, that's about $10 to buy the eye drops. This money was taken out of the money that was put aside for food, and after the latest increase, my income will not be enough for our daily expenses.
Protests erupted last month after Sudan announced austerity measures including fuel and electricity subsidy cuts and restrictions on some imports. Sudan's economy has struggled since South Sudan seceded in 2011, taking with it 3/4 of the country's oil output, a key source of foreign currency and government revenue. Its revenues dwindling, the government began reducing fuel and power subsidies in 2013 and announced a new round of cuts in early November that saw petrol prices rise above 30%. At the same time, Sudan has sought to alleviate a dollar shortage by introducing a second exchange rate alongside the official peg of 6.4 Sudanese pounds per dollar.
Voices were raised to prevent incidents of killing and bloodshed that we saw in past protests. So people agreed to call for civil disobedience on the 27th, 28th and 29th November. And that call was answered by many, especially on social media.
Rabi Abdul Hati, a senior official in Bashir's ruling party, defended the government's austerity measures and dismissed the calls for disobedience.
We thank you for watching. I am Bosun Amafaye, and I'll see you again. Bye for now.